Good morning, students. And today I welcome you all to the English class. It's day 4, and we'll be continuing with our explanation of the text, that is chapter number 2, Nelson Mandela, A Long Walk to Freedom, pages 20 to 23. Now, in the last decade of the 20th century and my own eighth decade as a man, that system had been overturned forever and replaced by one that recognized the rights and freedoms of all peoples, regardless of the color of their skin. Now, it has been a long struggle, a long walk to freedom that Nelson talks about in his autobiography against apartheid. And finally, now there was a government that was not believing in any kind of discrimination against people on terms of any particular aspect, be it color, caste, creed, or religion. That day had come about through the unimaginable sacrifices of thousands of my people, people whose sufferings and courage can never be counted or repaid. Now, just like India got its freedom with the help of so many freedom fighters struggling and sacrificing their lives, in the same manner, there were a number of people in South African region who struggled and sacrificed themselves for the sake of democracy and against apartheid. I felt that day, as I have on so many other days, that I was simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before me. That long and noble line ended and now began again with me. I was pained that I was not able to thank them and that they were not able to see what their sacrifices had wrought. Now, every other day, he remembered all the sacrifices that the freedom fighters had done for South African soil. But this time, while he was taking an oath, he was very, very sad that he could not thank all those freedom fighters who fought for democracy against apartheid because they were all dead and nobody was there to witness this revolution on South African soil. The policy of apartheid created a deep and lasting wound in my country and my people. All of us will spend many years, if not generations, recovering from that profound hurt. Now, apartheid was an inhumane aspect of the government where people were discriminated only on the basis of the color of their skin. So he said, though it has been replaced by democracy, but it will take many more years now. The generations will witness the new democratic change in South Africa, but the wound, the deep impact of apartheid will still have some kind of memories, bad ones though, or nightmarish memories in the hearts of the people of South Africa. But the decades of oppression and brutality had another unintended effect, and that was that it produced the Oliver Tambos, the Walter Sisselus, the Chief Lutherless, the Yusuf Dadus, the Bram Fishers, the Robert Sobukwis of our time. So the struggle had brought out a new generation of freedom fighters. Now, the names are peculiar because they belong to the African region, and because of these people, some of them, I would say, have been enlisted by Nelson. Because of the struggle of these people, now, the entire South African region got a democratic government that did not believe in any kind of discrimination. Men of such extraordinary courage, wisdom, and generosity that their like may never be known again. So these people that have been listed, some in the autobiography of Nelson, A Long Walk to Freedom, will never be seen, will never be heard of, but yes, they did produce a good amount of youth who were able to walk on their footsteps. Perhaps it requires such depths of oppression to create such heights of character. We can just compare a spring to such freedom fighters. The more you press down the spring, the more it's going to pop up or bounce back. So, in the same manner, this particular oppression or this particular apartheid that was a very inhuman act on the South African soil brought about a revolution wherein so many freedom fighters were born out of this particular apartheid law. My country is rich in the minerals and gems that lie beneath its soil, but I have always known that its greatest wealth is its people, finer and truer than the purest diamonds. So he loves his people and he tells them that you are more precious to me than any other gem or mineral found on the soil of South Africa. It is from these comrades means soldiers or fighters, in the struggle that I learned the meaning of courage. Time and again, I have seen men and women risk and give their lives for an idea, for something that they are in favor of. I have seen men stand up to attacks and torture without breaking, showing a strength and resilience that defies the imagination. Resilience, ability to recover or come back. Defies means to go against. So he has seen that all across the world, where people have fought for certain ideologies, certain things, they know that they are so strong that whatever happens to them, tortures, any kind of struggle, any kind of oppressions, or overpowering, they'll be able to come back or bounce back. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. So here he says that if people can learn to hate, nobody is born hating each other, right? God has not made us in a way that a Hindu will be against a Christian will be against a Muslim. We tend to develop these particular habits and notions when we grow in a community that is very, very narrow minded. So here he says that if people can learn to hate each other, then very well they can learn to love each other, because love is a natural aspect. An infant knows the touch of his mother's hand. He will definitely start crying and milieuing and will feel uncomfortable in the hands of a stranger. So, the love, the compassion, the sense of touch an infant can feel to the people whom he knows, right? In the same manner, we can just talk about that a person can learn to love easily because it is a natural process. Though hate is taught to people, don't talk to that person, don't talk to this person, irrespective of the caste, color, or let's say kind of gender. This is what we are taught in this world. But Nelson says that it is better to teach people love, because 50% job is done by nature. The remaining we have to inculcate in ourselves. Even in the grimmest times, grimmest, gloomy, or sad. In prison, when my comrades and I were pushed to our limits, tortured that they were made to rebel, I would see a glimmer, a shine of humanity in one of the guards, prison guards. Perhaps just for a second, but it was enough to reassure me and keep me going. Man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. In life, every man has twin obligations, meaning twin responsibilities. Responsibilities or obligations to his family, to his parents, his wife, and children. And he has an obligation to his people, country, or nation, his community, his country. In a civil and humane society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his own inclination and abilities. Now, here he talks about two very important responsibilities that a man or a woman has to take on the shoulders before they leave this world. And that is one responsible towards their family and one towards society or their country. And now it is a man who has to decide which one is prior to him or her. But in a country like South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of my birth, means of my race, and color to fulfill both those obligations. It was very difficult for the black Africans to choose or to fulfill both. In South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as human being was punished and isolated. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart, a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. Now he says, in a land that was filled with white supremacy and subjugation of the black people, right? There, living with both the responsibilities was next to an impossibility, because if a person was trying to fulfill both, he was again regarded as an outlaw. So he had to pick and choose. So basically, the family was given a secondary position as compared to the responsibility towards the nation. And if a person was there supporting his nation and supporting the ideologies of democracy, then he was termed as a rebellion, person going against the laws of the nation. I did not, in the beginning, choose to place my people above my family, but in attempting to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligations as a son, a brother, a father, and a husband. I was not born with hunger to be free. I was born free, free in every way that I could know. Now, Nelson talks about in his autobiography about his early life, and he says that when he gained conscience, he became a young man. For him, freedom meant freedom that was well fitting to him in all aspects, to move around, to read, to sleep, to get a job, to get education. This was freedom for him. He loved his family, he loved his parents, and he was so very happy in that particular family and race. But when he thought of his nation, his people, and serving them and doing his duty as a responsible citizen of his race of South Africa, there the tables turned. Whatever was good for him as freedom was a kind of a bubble in the water that vanished in a fraction of a second. I was not born with hunger to be free. There was no such kind of fire in him that made him realize that this is not freedom. Living in your own house, enjoying a happy and healthy family was not freedom for him when he realized the actual meaning of the word freedom. I was born free, free in every way that I could know. Free to run in the fields near my mother's hut, free to swim in the clear stream that ran through my village, free to roast millies. Millies? Maize plant. Under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow moving bulls. As long as I obeyed my father and abided by my customs of my tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of man or God. When he was young, for him, freedom meant reading, moving around, swimming in the waters, enjoying and running in the fields, and all the things that adolescents happen to have. But when he began to rebel against the customs and the laws, there was a complete makeover of the character of Nelson Mandela. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion, when I discovered as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me, that I began to hunger for it. At first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself, the transitory freedom, or a temporary freedom, we could say, of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased, and go where I chose. Later, as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family, the freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. So when he was young, for him, freedom meant running and skipping and enjoying and swimming and eating and drinking and having his family. When he became a bit mature, for him, freedom meant settling down in life, having a happy family, having a good earning or a job. This is what freedom was for him. But then I slowly saw that not only was I not free, but my brothers, means people of the same race, and sisters were not free. I saw that it was not just my freedom that was curtailed, but the freedom of everyone who looked like I did. That is when I joined the African National Congress. And that is when the hunger for my own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom. Now, he says, when I was pretty mature, I realized that the freedom I was craving for was not only restricted to me, but the freedom of my race was equally important for me to survive. So, when he grew a bit more in his age, in his maturity, he joined the African National Congress, and there his struggle against apartheid began. It was this desire for the freedom of my people to live their lives with dignity, respect, and self respect that animated my life, changed his life completely, that transformed a frightened young man into a bold one, that drove a law abiding attorney to become a criminal, that turned a family loving husband into a man without a home, a vagabond. Now, just imagine um, our Indian freedom fighters like Bhagat Singh, and we have so many lined up. We have Mahatma Gandhi, and we have other political leaders who were only believing in the fact that India should be freed from the clutches or bondage of the British rule. They left their families, they left all their personal desires and inclinations, and they worked only day and night, burning the midnight oil lamp just to give freedom to the country, to the nation. I and you weren't their relatives, but they knew that the generations that are going to come in India, will be born in India, will be thankful to them and will glorify their name. Because of them, because of their sacrifices and their struggles, India became free. In the same manner, Nelson talks about the fact that the moment he realized that not only he, but his race also required the freedom, and then only actual freedom could be gained. What happened? He became a vagabond, a loving husband, a law abiding man turns to be a rebel. The reason being, the laws that were not up to the mark, that was so inhuman, and as in the words of Nelson Mandela, extraordinary and harshest law ever to take place in the world was apartheid. I am no more virtuous or self sacrificing than the next man, but I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedoms I was allowed when I knew my people were not free. How could Nelson even think of enjoying his life, his job, and his family, living right there in his race when his own community was not free? And he knew somewhere in his mind that indirectly, even he was in bondage of this particular law known as apartheid. Freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow mindedness. So, a very good notion or idea that Nelson had was that the oppressor, person who is oppressed, right, who is subjugated or dominated over, is already a victim. But the person who is in dominance, who is dominating or who is domineering, is the person who is also somewhere uh, in bondage of his own narrow minded notions. So both are suffering on their respective ends. I am not truly free if I am taking away someone else's freedom, just as surely as I am not free when my freedom is taken from me. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. Prejudice, a strong dislike without any good reason. So Nelson says that while he is just talking in his autobiography, he's just telling what all struggles that the people make to free South African soil from apartheid. He says neither the oppressor nor the oppressed are free, because both have their own respective notions of being in bondage, right? So the oppressor and the oppressed both are deprived of humanity, because if a person has having humane qualities, he will neither be torturing any other race for the sake of petty issues like color of the skin. So this happens to be your complete explanation of the text. Kindly read it on ncert.in or other websites or wherever you find the text. It's a very important chapter as per CBSE board question paper. So make sure you do all the questions that are there in the book, the longer ones, the 8 markers, and the shorter ones, the 2 markers. Thank you.